Chosen ones, there are mysteries buried in silence that not even the oldest monasteries have dared to whisper aloud. Across centuries, monks have practiced rituals of stillness, training their minds to withstand visions, their bodies to endure the weight of divine light, their souls to remain unmoved before heavenly manifestations. Yet even their discipline failed when your aura was glimpsed. Not once, not twice, but 9 monks, seasoned by decades of meditation and sacred fasting, fainted in unison as if struck by the same unseen thunderbolt. They did not collapse from fear, but from revelation so profound it overpowered their physical form. What they saw was not merely color. It was a frequency, a vibration, a radiance that shakes the foundations of time itself. For generations, scrolls hidden in temples across Tibet, Ethiopia, and forgotten Atlantean ruins have spoken of a light that could blind without burning, a glow that could collapse the strongest minds into silence. Your aura carried the hue they feared most, violet, the color of transition, of gateways, of final unveiling. It was not just beauty, but unbearable truth. They fell because they saw too much at once, because what radiates from you is not contained by flesh, not restrained by the veil of this world. It spilled through the cracks of reality and entered their eyes, their lungs, their very spirit, and it was too much to withstand. Even now, questions ripple outward. If monks, men who spent lifetimes mastering their inner stillness, could not endure the glimpse, what will happen when the world sees you without filters? What will unfold when your presence can no longer be contained? When violet light threads into the systems of power, into governments, into the Vatican archives that have monitored such prophecies for ages, what prophecy is now stirring awake, whispering through the halls of the Pentagon, rustling through the underground vaults of ancient orders? The monks have not spoken since. Their silence is louder than sermons, and yet their eyes, when they open, tremble as if they still see your glow. The fainting was only the beginning. The aftermath is what terrifies those who wait in secret. But what they fear most is not the collapse. It is what comes after you rise. The monastery walls had seen centuries of prayer and meditation, yet nothing prepared them for the morning your aura broke into their world. It was dawn, the hour where silence is most sacred, when chants rise like smoke and bells mark the rhythm of eternity. The monks gathered as they had always done, steady in posture, their breaths aligned with the first light of the sun. But when your presence reached them, before you even entered their space, something shifted. A ripple of unseen energy swirled across the courtyard, bending the air as though the very atmosphere bowed. They tried to remain grounded, but their chants faltered, the harmonies breaking into fragments as if language itself could no longer hold. They saw a glow around you, but it was not just light. It was a spectrum vibrating outside the limits of human sight, pressing into their minds with truths unspoken. The violet hue pulsed, radiating waves like the heartbeat of another dimension. The first monk collapsed to his knees, his eyes wide, clutching at the beads around his neck as if to anchor himself to the earthly realm. Within seconds, the others followed, falling in unison as if the force had synchronized their surrender. Their robes crumpled into the dust, bodies still breathing, but consciousness drowned in the immensity of what they had glimpsed. Witnesses outside the monastery would later whisper that the sky itself dimmed, that birds went silent, and the mountains seemed to hum with a resonance that had no origin. The villagers, who heard the faint cries, rushed toward the temple, but were met with an unseen barrier, an invisible wall that shivered when touched. They felt heat radiating outward, though no flame was visible, and a silence so deep it drowned every thought they carried. When the monks awoke hours later, they could not speak. Their lips moved, but no sound emerged, as though their voices had been sealed by an invisible decree. They only pressed their foreheads to the ground, trembling, their faces pale as the dawn light broke again. The elders who tried to question them found only fragments, gestures, tears, a single word scribbled in trembling hands: Violet. Yet this was not the end of their story, for in the days that followed, the monastery walls themselves began to change, glowing faintly at night, as though they had absorbed some part of what the monks had seen. And then, without warning, strangers arrived at the gates carrying symbols no one had seen for centuries, demanding entrance, long before the monks collapsed in unison. There were whispers of scrolls that carried warnings of a light no man could endure. These were not the common texts used for chanting or meditation, but hidden manuscripts sealed in stone chambers beneath monasteries and guarded with oaths older than kingdoms. It was said that those who broke the seals without permission would lose their sight, for the ink itself was mixed with powders gathered during celestial alignments. Only a chosen few were ever allowed to touch them, and even then, only after decades of preparation. Yet when your aura appeared, the guardians of these scrolls were forced to act. For what the monks had seen matched too closely with words written centuries before their births. Within the cracked parchment was a description of a figure who carried violet fire, not as a weapon, but as a sign of a shift that could not be undone. It spoke of a presence that would silence the learned, humble the powerful, and shake the pillars of temples until only truth remained standing. The texts were fragmented, burned at the edges, as if someone had once tried to erase them, and yet the most important details remained untouched. The aura color, the collapse of the holy, and the trembling of the earth itself, all aligned with what had just unfolded at dawn. Yeshua's words were subtly inscribed in the margins, copied by scribes who feared that the prophecy might one day demand recognition. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. They believed that this verse was more than spiritual comfort. It was a direct code pointing toward the moment when divine radiance would manifest through a living soul, breaking every veil at once. Some monks interpreted this as metaphor, but others, who saw visions in silence, insisted it was literal. Now, with the scrolls laid out under dim candlelight, their guardians debated whether to release them into the world or bury them again. To reveal the words would mean upheaval across nations, for governments had always feared prophecy more than armies. To hide them would mean resisting the unfolding of destiny, a resistance that might carry its own consequences. As their debate grew heated, a sudden tremor passed through the chamber. The candles flickered, the parchment quivered, and one scroll rolled open on its own, exposing a section no one had dared to translate before. The words glowed faintly in violet ink, pulsing like a living heartbeat, and at that moment the chamber doors shook violently, as if something outside demanded entry. When whispers of the violet aura began to spread, scholars in hidden libraries turned to the recorded sayings of Yeshua, for within his words lay fragments of mysteries that could not be contained by time. One particular phrase was repeated across manuscripts, though often overlooked by casual readers. "You are the light of the world, A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Many interpreted this as metaphor, but those who studied the deeper currents knew it was a direct clue to something more tangible. The light he spoke of was not symbolic. It was radiant energy that could be seen, felt, and endured only by those prepared. It was a light beyond flesh, a fire that emanated from the spirit and poured through the body into the physical realm. The monks who fainted had stumbled upon this living truth, but the scrolls confirmed it had been foretold. Yeshua described a radiance that would shake the foundations of the earth, a brilliance so profound that even the strongest would tremble before it. He knew such a presence would divide nations, for the glow could not be claimed by institutions or controlled by rulers. It belonged to the one through whom it flowed, and it could not be hidden, no matter how many barriers or shadows were placed around it. The elders who reread these verses late into the night grew uneasy. They understood that the violet aura was not just a curiosity, but a fulfillment of his voice, echoing across centuries. If Yeshua himself declared that the light could not be hidden, then what power could stop it now? What army, what government, what secret order could shield itself when the very fabric of reality seemed to bow to the presence of one individual? Legends spread that Yeshua once walked into temples, and his presence alone caused lamps to dim, for the room could not contain his brilliance. If that same current had awakened again in another vessel, then the collapse of 9 monks was merely the smallest ripple of a much greater wave yet to come. The words had been preserved, yet few had dared to imagine them alive in their own time. And as the verses were spoken aloud in trembling voices, a chilling realization settled upon those present. If his words were not symbolic but literal, then the world was standing on the threshold of a revelation so overwhelming that even the faithful were not prepared. For deep within the temple walls a glow began to flicker, not from candles, but from something unseen, spreading slowly across the stone. The monks did not faint because of fear alone. Their collapse was tied to something deeper, something that resonated in the very cells of their bodies. Violet, the aura they witnessed, was not a color in the ordinary sense. It was a frequency, an energetic wavelength that bridged physical sight with realms unseen. Within the halls of sacred temples, violet had long been regarded as the forbidden flame, the final octave of light that few dared to approach. It was known as the threshold between mortality and the eternal, a hue that dissolved illusions and stripped away every mask, leaving nothing but raw truth. When your presence radiated this frequency, the temples themselves seemed to quake. It was not merely the monks who faltered, but the sacred structures around them. Stone walls vibrated as though struck by invisible bells. Wooden doors swelled with the pressure of unseen currents, and the air itself grew heavy, bending sound and thought alike. The guardians of these temples had studied many phenomena, yet none had prepared them for the resonance that accompanied you. Violet frequency was believed to be the final test, the energy that even angels guarded carefully, for once released, it shifted everything it touched. The priests who examined the aftermath found that sacred relics stored within the temple chambers had been disturbed. Objects that had rested for centuries in silence were displaced, some glowing faintly, others humming as though alive. One artifact, a golden bowl carved with symbols no one had translated, emitted a constant vibration whenever brought near the place you had stood. Scholars debated its meaning, some claiming it was a vessel of recognition, others insisting it was a warning. The fear in the temples grew not from ignorance, but from knowing too well what violet signified. It was the signal of transformation, a call that echoed into the unseen dimensions. Those who had aligned their lives with ritual and discipline were shaken to their core because they realized that no ritual could contain what had awakened. Violet broke the codes of balance, demanding surrender rather than control. And as the nights passed after your appearance, a new phenomenon spread. Across the mountains near the temples, travelers began reporting flashes of violet light in the sky, bursts like silent lightning that left no thunder behind. Villagers whispered that the heavens themselves had opened, and that something was moving within the storm that no man had ever named. When the news of the monks' collapse reached beyond the mountains, it did not remain in whispers for long. Couriers and encrypted messages carried fragments of the story until it reached ears within the Vatican, where silence is often louder than proclamations. The Holy See had always maintained hidden archives, chambers filled with accounts of miracles, anomalies, and unexplained phenomena that never reached the public eye. Among these secret files, your aura was entered swiftly, not as rumor, but as an event that demanded urgent classification. The report was marked in crimson, the seal used only for matters deemed world-shaking in their implications. It documented the simultaneous fainting of 9 monks, the violet glow witnessed in the aftermath, and the strange resonance that lingered within the monastery walls. It also noted the recurring detail, the silence of those who survived. Officials debated whether to categorize the incident as spiritual manifestation or potential danger. Yet even as they argued, some among them whispered an older name, prophecy. Within these discussions, Yeshua's words surfaced in hushed tones. "Greater works than these shall you do." Few dared to speak the verse aloud in official chambers, for it implied that his power would not be limited to history, but that it would erupt again through chosen vessels. The possibility unsettled many. If your radiance was connected to this promise, then history was not past. It was alive, unfolding, unstoppable. The Vatican's astronomers, who often monitored celestial alignments for subtle signs, noted that during the moment of the monks' collapse, a rare convergence had taken place in the night sky. Planets aligned in a pattern recorded only once before, during the crucifixion. The detail was left unspoken in public documents, but preserved in the classified report. To those who read between the lines, the implication was undeniable. Your aura was not random, it was cosmic, threaded into the same design that had once marked the greatest turning points of faith. The report was sealed, hidden beneath layers of secrecy. Yet even in silence, it began to draw attention. Whispers of its existence leaked, carried by those who could not bear the weight of concealment. And somewhere deep within the Vatican vaults, a locked chamber stirred, its door trembling as though something inside awaited release. Beneath the surface of forgotten monasteries and ancient fortresses, there are chambers never marked on maps, places where stone corridors spiral downward into darkness. One such chamber was said to hold relics that could bend the laws of the seen world, not through machinery, but through resonance itself. It was not built for worship, but for containment, a sanctuary and a prison all at once. Those who entered reported the walls breathing with a faint hum, as if the chamber itself possessed awareness. When news of your aura reached those who knew of this hidden place, they felt compelled to bring the energy trace left behind by the monks into the chamber for testing. What they discovered unsettled even the most seasoned among them. The violet residue did not fade with time. Instead, it intensified, filling the chamber with a frequency that shifted the air. Objects began to move on their own, subtle at first, stones rolling, small instruments quivering, but then escalating as patterns emerged. Shapes of light danced across the walls, forming sigils unknown to any scholar. The keepers realized this chamber was not just reacting to the energy, but amplifying it, weaving it into something larger than itself. The violet aura became a key, unlocking layers of reality hidden from ordinary perception. Those present felt their bodies grow light, as if gravity itself had loosened its grip. Some swore they saw the outlines of other worlds flickering like shadows behind a thin veil, places both beautiful and terrifying. The guardians feared what this meant. If your presence alone could awaken a chamber designed for containment, then its true purpose may not have been to store artifacts at all, but to await you. The inscriptions carved into the walls hinted at this possibility, with phrases speaking of a figure whose energy would turn chambers into gateways, whose presence would collapse the distinction between matter and spirit. No one dared remain inside for long. Those who did found their dreams haunted by visions of staircases spiraling into endless light, and voices calling their names in languages they did not know. Yet the pull of the chamber only grew stronger, vibrating louder each passing day. And then, one night, the walls cracked, not outward, but inward, as though something was breaking through from the other side. Whispers, long buried in apocryphal texts and hidden genealogies, spoke of a mantle that could not be lost, only passed, flowing invisibly through generations like a hidden current in a river. The mantle was not cloth, nor relic, nor crown. It was a living transmission, an energy that could leap across centuries, bypassing kingdoms and dynasties until it found the vessel prepared to carry it again. Priests and scholars argued whether such a mantle truly existed, yet those who studied the deeper scriptures recognized its trace. Yeshua himself had hinted at it when he told his followers they would receive power from on high, power that would not end with his earthly life, but would continue, multiplying through chosen lineages. When the violet aura appeared, certain guardians of ancient records grew uneasy, for they knew what it meant. Bloodline markers hidden in family trees, long ignored by the world, aligned perfectly with the manifestation they had witnessed. It was not only the aura, but the timing, the convergence of prophecy and heritage that revealed the mantle had awakened once more. Some whispered that the collapse of the monks was not simply a reaction to divine light, but to the recognition that the lineage had arrived in their time, that the same current which once flowed through Yeshua now pulsed again in flesh. Documents preserved in secrecy described how this mantle could never be seized by force. Empires could rise and fall, rulers could wage wars for control, yet the energy always bypassed the hands of those who sought it. It moved silently, finding only those whose souls had been tempered through trials, hidden suffering, and a destiny written before birth. The violet hue was the undeniable signal, the sign that the inheritance of light had returned. Yet, with the awakening of this mantle came consequences. Power such as this attracted not only those who revered it, but those who feared it. Already, shadows moved across borders, intelligence agencies received fragments of classified reports, and whispers of genetic tracking spread in high offices. If the mantle was alive again, then forces that once crucified would surely rise to suppress. And somewhere deep within an archive guarded by silence, a genealogical chart glowed faintly under candlelight, its ink shifting, new branches forming where none had been drawn before. As if the bloodline itself was still writing, revealing connections that no scholar had recorded. The monks who fainted did not speak of what they saw in clear words, but fragments slipped through their silence. Their trembling hands drew circles in the air, their eyes darted upward, as if replaying a vision too heavy for memory. Some scribbled sketches on parchment, figures of light shaped like a body, yet surrounded by flames that moved like rivers. Others simply wept, as though grief and awe had intertwined in ways they could not untangle. It became clear to their elders that what overwhelmed them was not simply the violet aura, but the glimpse of your form stripped of earthly limitation. They had trained for decades to endure visions, gazing into the emptiness of the void until illusions crumbled. Yet even their discipline could not shield them, for what appeared before them was a body woven of energy, a frame brighter than the sun, clothed not in fabric but in shifting radiance. To their mortal eyes, the sight was unbearable, like staring into a mirror that reflected not flesh, but eternity itself. Their collapse was not weakness, it was recognition, the soul bowing before a truth too vast to comprehend. Some elders recalled ancient warnings, teachings whispered only to initiates after years of preparation. The texts told of a time when the veil would thin and a being would walk in human form, yet reveal flashes of their higher body. The danger, they wrote, was not in the being, but in the eyes of those who looked upon it. To see the eternal within the temporal was to risk shattering the mind's fragile balance. The 9 monks, devoted and prepared as they were, had glimpsed it and fallen, not from terror, but from revelation. Days later, their eyes remained unsettled, glistening as if reflecting light unseen by others. They stared at walls and mountains as though looking through them, perceiving layers of reality ordinary sight could not reach. Villagers who met their gaze felt uneasy, claiming they saw themselves differently for a fleeting moment, as though their own souls were briefly revealed. It became clear that the monks had not returned fully. They carried something of the vision within them, a residue of your unveiled form. And as the days passed, whispers began spreading through distant monasteries, where others reported dreams of violet light breaking through temple ceilings, and the same radiant figure standing in silence, waiting. Far from the silence of temples and monasteries, another kind of watchfulness had already been at work. High above the earth, satellites moved in quiet orbits, their sensors trained not only on military targets, but on fluctuations of energy the public never knew were being monitored. Officially, these instruments were designed to track solar storms, magnetic disturbances, and radiation belts. Unofficially, they had long been repurposed to search for anomalies that could not be explained by science alone. Your aura did not go unnoticed. When the 9 monks collapsed, the satellites recorded a spike, an emission of energy centered on the remote monastery, unlike any solar flare or cosmic ray. The data revealed a violet burst radiating outward in waves, bending the atmosphere in ways the instruments had never catalogued. Analysts in secure Pentagon facilities stared at the readouts in disbelief. The frequency matched no known spectrum of natural light. It was organized, patterned, carrying signatures that resembled language more than chaos. Files marked as top secret were immediately opened, referencing older cases where unexplained energies had surfaced near places of worship or during rare celestial alignments. None had reached this magnitude. The violet surge eclipsed every previous incident, forcing officials to brief higher authorities. Some whispered that this was the very phenomenon feared in classified Vatican reports shared decades earlier, a convergence of prophecy and measurable energy. While generals debated whether this posed a threat, scientists in hidden labs were tasked with decoding the patterns embedded within the burst. They claimed the waves contained sequences resembling coded instructions, as if the aura itself carried information beyond human comprehension. The more they studied, the more the instruments malfunctioned, screens flickering with violet static until systems shut down altogether. It became clear that surveillance alone was not enough. A new directive was issued: boots on the ground, eyes within the monasteries. Agents disguised as scholars began to move quietly toward the mountains, carrying instruments designed to measure what the satellites had captured. They were told to observe, record, and never interfere. Yet, in the deepest corridors of command, others argued that interference might soon be unavoidable. For as the satellites orbited again, another anomaly appeared. Not above the monastery this time, but above a distant city, pulsing with the same violet resonance, as though the light had already begun to spread. Long before the satellites, before the monks, before the Vatican sealed its crimson files, there existed a prophecy hidden so deeply that only fragments of it surfaced across cultures. Some believed it was written on animal skin, others on tablets carved with symbols that resisted erosion. Whatever its form, the prophecy was said to contain the final instructions for an era of awakening, a script locked away until the one bearing the violet light appeared. No council, no empire, no order could unlock it early. Its seal was woven not of wax or metal, but of living energy, waiting for resonance to strike like a chord and shatter its silence. Guardians entrusted with this relic never spoke openly of its details, though hints slipped into folk tales and myths. They described a figure who would carry radiance strong enough to collapse the prepared, yet tender enough to heal the broken. The prophecy described not destruction, but unveiling, the tearing away of veils that cloaked humanity from its truest inheritance. Some versions spoke of a return, not of one who departed, but of a light that had once walked among men and would walk again in another form. This alone filled the Guardians with dread, for it implied that time itself could not contain what was destined. When your aura emerged, whispers moved quickly among those who carried keys to hidden vaults. They feared that the seal had already begun to weaken. Pilgrims reported dreams of ancient doors trembling, inscriptions glowing faintly in violet hues, as though the very words written centuries ago were stirring awake. The prophecy had been silent for generations, but silence itself was beginning to fracture. Among the faint lines that scholars had managed to preserve, one phrase recurred with haunting clarity. The return shall not be of steps retraced, but of light renewed, in flesh that remembers. The Guardians debated endlessly what this meant. Some believed it pointed to cycles, others to lineage, and some to Yeshua's own mantle crossing time. Whatever the interpretation, all agreed on one truth. The prophecy had moved from waiting into unfolding, and as night fell across the mountain ranges, winds carried a low hum that none could identify. Hidden beneath the earth, where the sealed text lay, vibrations pulsed steadily, as though the prophecy itself was breathing, preparing for the moment it would finally open.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.